Okay, let's get started then. Good morning and welcome to Bluewater Church Online. My name's Wes Larson and I am just so glad that you can be part of us and joining us this morning. This summer, actually starting July the 2nd, we're going to be starting meeting in person for our Sunday worship services at 10:30 a.m. at the Bridge in Concord. We'd love to have you join us for worship. We're also going to there'll be a message, community, and coffee. So please do come join us. It would be great to meet you and spend time with you. We will also continue to provide the message here on YouTube, and that will be each Sunday morning starting at 9:45. If you haven't already signed up on our email list, go to bluewater.church.ca and sign up. It's the best way to stay up to date with everything that we're doing and all things Blue Water. So now enjoy this morning's message and blessings to you. Take care. Bye now.
The story time of supper and story, but please keep enjoying your cake and your tea and coffee. And thank you very much, by the way, for everything. This supper and stories has been a lot of fun for me, and it's been really great getting to know some of you more here. And I hope that many of you can make it out to the Blue Water brunches that are happening earlier in the day at 10:30 a.m. instead of this evening time on the fourth Sunday of every month. So anyway, I better get on with the story. Today's story comes from the Gospel of John in chapter 5. And Jesus, just before this passage, this story, had just been spending some time in Cana, the little town of Cana in Galilee. And he travels from Cana to Jerusalem, where he meets a paralyzed man. And Jesus finds this man among a great number of disabled people at the pool of Bethesda. The people believed that every once in a while an angel of the Lord would stir the water in the pool of Bethesda. And the first person to get into the water when it was stirred would be cured of whatever illness they had. And yes, I have many questions about that too. But it's not the main point of the story. So after this paralyzed man's encounter with Jesus, he gets in a little bit of trouble with the Jewish religious leaders for breaking a particular interpretation of a sacred Sabbath law. That is the law that God gave to his people to rest. And so this is the scene for the story that I'm about to read for us, and it begins like this. Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie: the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." And at once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, and the law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you're well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." Yes. The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who made him well. As I reflected on this story, I began by taking some notes. That's what it does. So here are my original notes, and you can see the top 2/3 of the page. These are all just questions I have. Lots of questions about what's happening and what does this mean and what did Jesus mean by that. And then at the very bottom, maybe about 1/3 of the page, are some possible answers to all of these questions. And so then I did some research, and then after that I actually had more questions. So as a tip, a little aside for you here, let me suggest to you that if you ever find yourself reading the Jesus stories in the Bible, be prepared to leave with more questions than answers. I know that can be uncomfortable because we really like to figure things out and to fully understand everything because that makes us feel safe and comfortable, like we know what's going on. But if we could be okay with reading these stories, coming away with questions, that means that you are curious, you are humbled, and you have a great capacity for awe and for wonder. God can work with those things. So needless to say, there are many interpretations for this story, so I offer you just one possibility. Jesus knows that the paralyzed man has been lying beside these healing waters for a very long time. And Jesus asks him a strange question. Do you want to get well? It seems pretty obvious. So obvious that the man doesn't actually answer him. He evades the question. Instead, he points out all of the reasons that healing is not possible for him. He's focused on the very real obstacles to the bodily healing that he has in mind. First of all, he is alone. He's got no one in the world to help him into the water when it's stirred. And he's poor, a beggar, who can't even pay someone to lend him a hand. There's no way up the social or the economic ladder for this paralyzed man, and he knows it. Add to that the burden of an entire culture that is set against people like this. In that time, they believed that a person's suffering was inflicted on them by God as punishment for sin. So as far as most people were concerned, this man probably deserved his punishment, his ailment. Maybe if someone manages to be first into those healing waters, maybe that person could win God's mercy and be cured. That was the thought. On the flip side, those people who were prosperous and successful were considered to be blessed by God. For example, the Jewish leaders in this story, they were at the top of the social, the economic, and of course the religious structures of society. They held a place of honor. But here, Jesus challenges the worldview that says the last really deserve to be last, and the first deserve to be first. If you're familiar with the other Jesus stories in the Gospels, you might recall the time Jesus said the exact opposite. He said, in his kingdom, the first will be last, and the last will be first. In response to Jesus' question, do you want to be well? The paralyzed man basically says, there's no hope for me. Why bother asking? To which Jesus replies, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And at once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. So I'm wondering if in your life, do you ever feel stuck, paralyzed, if you will? Is there some part of your life that you think, if I could only overcome this one thing, I might have a chance at a good life? If you had to name one place in your life that feels paralyzed today, what would that be? Perhaps a physical illness, an addiction, a relationship, or a false belief that you're just flawed beyond repair. Like the paralyzed man, many of us often think, if I could just beat the odds and get into that pool of healing water, if I could overcome that one thing, life would be smooth sailing for a while, and I might be okay. What would you say if Jesus were to ask you, do you want to do well? Would you, like the man in the story, list all of these real obstacles to your wellness? Like it's impossible for me to be well because of, bad government policies, or unfair social or religious beliefs, or inherited biology in my DNA, or just too much trauma in my past. Maybe you would tell Jesus, I would like to get into that healing water so that I can be healed. But it's impossible. I can't get myself there, and I don't think the world is going to help me. And if that's the case, here's the very good news. Jesus doesn't just help you into the water. Jesus is the water. Before you ever lift a finger, before you win the competition for first place, before you receive approval from anyone else, before your life has outward signs of blessings even, Jesus comes to you exactly where you are. And when you are willing to say yes to the wellness Jesus offers, just like this man was willing to risk breaking a religious law by picking up his mat on the Sabbath day, Jesus will make you well by means and by methods that this world might not even recognize. Jesus will make you well in ways that you didn't even know to ask for. So I hope for us we can be curious people, that we can keep our hearts and minds open to the healing that Jesus offers each one of us. After that paralyzed man is healed, after he's criticized by the religious rulers, where does Jesus find him? He finds him at the temple, at the place of worship. And Jesus demonstrates to that man that God is kind, God is powerful, and God is oh so creative. The man was not paralyzed because of God's judgment on him. In fact, his healing is a judgment on the oppressive structures that kept him down, that kept him poor and alone, and neglected by those who were actually in a position to help him. And if you leave here remembering only one thing today, let it be this: God is kind and gracious towards you exactly where you are today. God is good and desires goodness for you. And Jesus himself demonstrates the goodness of God in surprising and creative ways. And when you believe this, you will still face obstacles, and you'll still have your list of questions, maybe even twice as many questions as you have answers. And it's not that those questions will become less important. It's that you will become calmer in the face of those very real obstacles and very real questions when you believe that God is good. For example, when we believe God is good, Jesus' final words here to that healed man, they sound less like a threat and more like a neutral statement of reality. Stop sinning, Jesus tells the healed man, or something worse may happen to you. Not a threat, simply a fact. A fact like the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. A fact like when I drop this pen, gravity is gonna pull it down. A fact like sin is simply the absence of love, a rejection of goodness, and it leads to its own destruction. Jesus came to earth to accomplish many eternally significant and mysterious things. And one of the things he came to do is to show the world some facts about God, a good God who is filled with grace and love for all people. And believing the story of God's goodness may just change the entire story of your life. And that is the end of our story today.